Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about ethics. It's a concept that honestly shapes everything in our world, from the biggest companies right down to the little decisions we make every single day. So let's kick things off with this classic piece of advice from Shakespeare. It's all about integrity. Because when this one simple idea, just being true to yourself and to others, gets tossed aside, well, the results can be absolutely devastating. Okay, let's get into it. Check out this number, $101 billion. Back in the year 2000, that was the reported annual revenue for a company called Enron. They were a massive player in the energy world, with something like 22,000 employees, a true giant. And then, just 1 year later, poof, gone. Enron became the poster child for one of the biggest accounting scandals in modern history. The company became worthless. Its stock price plummeted from over $90 a share to less than $1, and thousands upon thousands of people lost everything. So how does something like that even happen? I mean, how does a corporate titan just vanish? The answer isn't just about bad spreadsheets or a shaky business model. No, this was a complete and total failure of ethical behavior. And to really understand what went wrong, we've got to diagnose the problem at its core. All right, so to really get to the heart of what's going on in stories like Enron's, we need to be crystal clear on the difference between three key ideas that, let's be honest, people mix up all the time. Okay, so you've got morals, ethics, and law. Morals, that's your own personal compass, what you believe is right and wrong. Then you have ethics. Those are more like codes of conduct for a specific group, like doctors or journalists. And finally, you have laws. Those are the formal rules for everyone in society. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Something can be perfectly legal, but still completely unethical. That gray area is where a lot of the trouble starts. And this brings us to this really fascinating psychological concept that helps explain what happens to people in power. It's called the Bathsheba syndrome. It's named after a biblical story, but the idea is timeless. It describes how incredibly successful leaders can get to a point where they believe the rules just don't apply to them anymore. They're the exception. And when leaders and the organizations they run start thinking that way, well, the consequences are never just about money. They create this massive ripple effect of damage that hurts real people in real, sometimes tragic ways. And look, this is not just an Enron thing. This pattern pops up everywhere. You had Takata, who used a cheaper, unstable chemical in their airbags even though they were warned, which led to over 100 million recalls and, tragically, multiple deaths. Or think about Wells Fargo, where employees, pushed by insane sales goals, created millions of fake bank accounts, totally shattering public trust. And then there's Facebook, which wildly exaggerated how long people were watching video ads, duping advertisers out of their money. Different companies, different industries, but it's the same story of ethical failure with devastating results. You know, all of this perfectly demonstrates a legal idea that companies just can't afford to ignore. It's called respondeat superior. It's Latin, but it basically means let the master answer. The whole point is that society expects companies to be accountable. It means the organization itself can be held legally responsible for what its employees do, even if those employees were breaking the rules. The buck doesn't stop with some low-level manager, it goes all the way to the top. Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the fix? It's not just about dodging lawsuits. It's about actually building a culture where people do the right thing. This is where corporate social responsibility, or CSR, comes in. It's the idea that a business has a duty not just to its shareholders, but to everyone it impacts: customers, employees, the whole community. Let's take a look at the blueprint for that. So the source material lays out a pretty clear 4-step plan for any organization that's serious about this. First, you appoint a dedicated ethics officer. You need someone whose actual job it is to worry about this stuff. Second, you have to establish a super clear written code of ethics, no ambiguity. Third, you conduct regular social audits to make sure you're actually walking the walk. And finally, you have to provide ongoing ethics training for everybody. It's got to be a constant effort, not a one-time thing. And this isn't just theory. Let's look at a company like Intel. Their code of conduct is built on 5 really straightforward principles. Do business with integrity, follow the law, treat people with fairness, steer clear of conflicts of interest, and protect the company's assets and good name. It's simple, it's direct, and there's no wiggle room. But look, an ethical culture isn't just a top-down mandate. It's also built by the thousands of choices that each and every one of us makes. So the source material also gives us a practical 5-step guide for your own ethical decisions. First, really define the problem. Then figure out what your options are. Next, choose the best alternative. Then you implement it, and finally, and this is the part a lot of people skip, you evaluate the results. It's a way to think clearly when the pressure is on. And making those choices is getting way more complicated these days. Why? Because the internet and social media have created this whole new frontier, a digital Wild West, full of brand new ethical traps we all have to navigate. The thing about the digital world is that it just amps everything up. The speed, the scale, the anonymity, it creates a perfect storm for new kinds of ethical dilemmas. Just think about it. Our personal data has become a product to be bought and sold. Misinformation can circle the globe in an instant, and protecting our own privacy feels like a full-time job. The fundamental principles of right and wrong haven't changed, but the tools and the potential for damage have exploded, and our ethical rules are sprinting to catch up. So, at the end of the day, after all the theories, the case studies, the corporate codes, what does it all really boil down to? It comes down to the choices that we all make. So the question to leave you with is a simple one. When you're facing that difficult choice and nobody's looking over your shoulder, what are you going to do?